Hi, welcome back to Backstage WA. I'm Shannon.
And I'm Callan.
And today we're here with Sukhjit, who is the Executive Director of the Blue Room Theatre. How are you?
Hey, how you going?
Going well. Really excited to have you on.
This is cool. This is like the ladies. It's like the ladies'
True,
corner.
we do enjoy
The
the
girls'
ladies,
room.
the girls' room,
But I
the
also
ladies' lounge.
I didn't dress the same as you guys, and I wish maybe we coordinated.
No, we should have
'cause
actually.
Now I
I
look like
feel
a fruit
like
basket.
We're
That's
all
cool.
different outfits.
But you know,
today.
that's the beauty of it's the tapestry of the world. It's
Tapestry.
coming together.
You're wearing a tapestry.
Literally wearing a tapestry at this moment. That's so funny.
Funny.
Yeah. So you're working right now at the Blue Room as the executive director, if I'm correct. How did you get started in that? And do you have like a background in theatre that kind of led you to that position?
Yeah, I feel like this is one of those roles where I feel like everything I've done over the last decade has led me to this moment, but I didn't even know I was going to be in this moment. So that's really exciting. I've been in this role for the last 4 months, and it's been really challenging, but really rewarding. I started off as a spoken word artist, so I did a lot of poetry, a lot of slam poetry, and I used to tour with hip hop artists and be like their support act. I, met all my Sikh role models around the world, and I always had this pull towards theatre and live performance, even though I love the magic of storytelling in all forms. But I think there's something really electric about having someone standing right in front of you and emoting, and you're right there, and it's just really cool, and you can't replicate it, which is great. But yeah, so I ended up moving to Melbourne after university and spent like 5 years there working in community arts and really learning about storytelling in communities. And then came back to Perth, did a theatre show with Black Swan and Barking Gecko, and COVID happened, and then 3 years of reflection and asking myself, what do I want to do, led me to today, and just feeling like I'm living the dream, the Perth dream.
What's the slam poetry scene like in Perth? Did you do a lot of stuff here, or was it mostly in Melbourne? Because I feel like that's like really a cool niche that you don't see it around much.
Yeah, and now my first experience going to a slam poetry event was a pure accident. I was walking down the street. I was 18. I was still in uni, and I walked past the Bird. I'd never been to the Bird. I was probably like just legal to be able to go into the Bird, and there was this like performance going on, and my friend and I were like, let's just walk in and see what happens. Turns out it was a full-on competition. It was a heat, and she goes, put your name down. And I was like, oh, okay, sure, I've got confidence. And then I put my name down, and they called me out. I was the first person called out of this hat. So I went on stage and I did this poem, and I was like, I don't know what's going on. And then I fast forward, I'm at the Opera House also doing a poem, and it's this massive international competition. And then I met all these people that do this full time and tour and write books. And it really opened me up to, as an 18-year-old, that people actually can work in the arts as a career. I didn't know that was an option. And at that age, I was really lucky that I got exposed to that. So Perth, those events that I used to go to would have hundreds of people showing up to watch poetry, and that blew my mind. And then I went to Melbourne, and every night I had 2 or 3 different poetry events I could choose from 7 days a week. And then I went to Chicago, and that's the birthplace of slam poetry, and that's where a lot of the culture really kicked off. And that was also phenomenal. It was just really cool seeing a bunch of poets get together and that's their thing. Yeah. But then I also I started craving collaboration. I think it was a very solo sport. And I really missed being able to collaborate with different art forms. Sometimes I really wanted to put some music with my poetry, or live, or even recording it and just doing bits of that. A lot of rappers and hip hop artists, they started off as spoken word poets. It's such a big part of their journey, and it's such a cool skill set. I love the ability to communicate what's going on inside, how to interpret the world around you, and the roots of social justice also kind of drizzled in.
So cool. Do you have a favorite rapper who, for not just for music but kind of as an inspiration for your work?
I don't know if you've heard of So Omar Musa is someone I met when I went to that Opera House Australian Poetry Slam. He was like you have this sacrificial poet, which is someone who isn't competing, isn't as nervous as everyone else, but has kind of been brought in to, I guess, be the sacrificial goat. I don't know. Yeah. And then he was the person that I first saw perform. And what I loved about his performance, and he also raps, and I've toured with him as well, I like that when he raps, I can understand every word he's saying, and that's the difference between someone who started off as a poet and now raps as opposed to just rapping, because the enunciation is just so cool. And the storytelling, like he's even a writer, like he's written these beautiful books, and when you read them, you almost want to read them out loud because they're just so rhythmic. Yeah, so I really love, and look, obviously, like I've been watching Atlanta lately, and I just get blown away at his mind. His mind is just so incredible and so smart, and that intersection between someone doing film, someone making music, someone, I'm sure he's doing a whole bunch of other things as well, and it's just like, I love minds like that. So I have to say Childish Gambino as well.
I would say you kind of have that kind of mind too, because you do a lot of things yourself.
Wow.
Sounds like the
That
Childish
is
Gambino.
good compliments.
Yeah.
Who would have thought? Oh my God, thank you. You're making a brown girl go like red. Didn't even know that was possible.
I don't know. So you did have your show Fully Seek. Can you run us through that and the whole process with that?
Yeah, so that was the first time that I had to write. I was given the challenge to write a 75-minute long poem, and the longest poetry set I'd ever done was like a 45-minute set at some like dingy bar. But this was the first time I was going to actually learn how to craft a story, how to keep an audience engaged, and the brief was it was going to be for 12-year-olds. So as you can imagine, that's a really hard demographic to please. And the show was about my experiences growing up in Perth, being a Sikh woman, exploring all that stuff that you go through in high school, bullying, hairy legs, periods, like all that jazz. So that was a really special show for me because I got to almost write a love letter to my family. And even though families are hard and there's a lot of conflict and there's a lot of challenge, especially if you're growing up in a society in Perth that is super different from your house at home, like within a suburb in Perth, you can kind of get a bit confused about where you're meant to be or where you belong and all those beautiful arcs. But it premiered end of 2019, so it had a beautiful tour planned, and then COVID happened and I panicked and I didn't know what to do with my life. So I started, I got into film and I started learning how to write, how to like convert those skills of poetry, but also theatre writing. And I just fell in love with, this art form as well. So, it was beautiful.
I think 12-year-old is like the perfect demographic for that, because I grew up as a brown girl in Geraldton, and I remember at 12 like begging my mom to let me shave my legs because like everyone used to like make fun of me for it. So I feel like 12 is like the right demographic for that type of show.
And that's my favorite age group. Like I work in a lot in schools, and I like spent most of my career like hustling and doing my art, but then also working with young people, because that's the sort of like age that you wish you had people kind of supporting you and just kind of helping you out throughout that journey. So then when you get to your 20s, your self-worth and your confidence, like, because confidence is like the key to so much that we do, whether it is in the arts or not in the arts. Like it really helps your relationships. It really helps your family dynamics. It really helps articulating, what's going on. So I love that age group. And I think it's getting younger. I feel like people are definitely shaving as 8-year-olds. I feel like it's just, the world's definitely...
Kids are growing up way faster nowadays, which is kind of scary.
They're better dressed.
They're looking back at 12. It's a rough era for fashion for me personally. It was a bit rough.
It was mine was like board shorts from JJ's that like are knee length, and then like weird like monkey. There was lots of monkey like cartoons,
the Frank, whatever it was, brand. I forgot what it was.
A lot of that. A lot of like rip curl, a lot of sporty,
what was the
surfy.
moment? Why were we all dressing like we were like on like Blue Water High.
Yeah.
And like
No,
we're
mine
on the
was
beach.
Supre. Mine was
Yeah, no,
like head
definitely
to
Supre
toe.
was the
Supre.
moment.
If you had the Supre headband
Yep.
in all different colours, like you were the coolest person at school.
And what was with those waists? So at school, you had like your shorts or your skirt, but then you had these super waistbands.
Yeah,
I don't know what
that
they
was me.
did,
Yeah,
but they were there.
yeah, no, that's
Good times. But so my show, the Fully Seek, was literally drizzled with like Impulse deodorant, Supre, Hoyts. Like it just had all those Woolworths. Like it had all that sort of Perth sort of storytelling in it. Because I think sometimes when we look at theatre, there is this sense where we look, a lot of great theatre shows have been written over East, and the references of the iconic streets of Melbourne or even Brisbane. Like there's just so much storytelling of Australian theatre that, yeah, I feel like in Perth we've got a couple of things going on, but I definitely don't think we've got enough diverse storytelling. So,
I agree
yeah.
with that. Yeah.
Definitely. And with you mentioned that you were kind of transitioning into film. How did you find that process? Like, what are you interested in working in film? And how did you find the transition from writing for theatre and writing for poetry to writing for film? Because it is really a whole different skill set.
It's so different. I think initially I just thought I'd be able to transfer those skills really quickly, but then I learned that film, there's just so much problem solving. I think that when you go from being a poet where everything is like free, there's not many rules when it comes to being a spoken word poet. I think if you're writing music, then there is some sort of form and you can kind of have some sort of structure. And then theatre also has structure, but the show that I'd written was also poetry. So it was just, it was like the biggest learning curve to learn how to write for film. And I think that there's a lot of people that might have a misconception of how, like, it is still a creative way of writing, but it's definitely uses a different part of your brain. It's a pretty logical way of writing, I think. And I feel like I haven't yet mastered it to be able to break it. Sometimes I have this like resistance and I just want to break those rules. But I know that sometimes there is something great about learning it before you can kind of, go all out. But yeah, I think, but also just the process of producing film. I think that, I also work not just as a writer, but in the producing world. So I feel like if you're touring as a poet and you're a solo artist, you pick up your suitcase and you get in the plane. Whereas if you make a theatre show, there's a couple of more people involved, there's a bit more money involved. But then for film, it just feels like the risk and the stakes and the money and the teams are just like so much bigger than anything else I've ever experienced. So it's sometimes I want to go back to making things on my own because sometimes it can feel unachievable, but I think it's getting better. I hope it's getting better for the next generation.
Do you want to kind of inspire younger people to kind of find themselves creatively as well? Because I think that's can make such a difference as seeing something like that at that age and being like, I want to make something as well.
Totally. I like so I went on these tours, like meeting every Sikh community in every country I could possibly go to. And I learnt so much about the diaspora communities that are similar to what we're going through. But then there's some differences according to like how many generations have been around or, what cultural context they're in and how they relate to social issues. And I feel like something that I love imagining when I'm writing something, whether it's a song, whether it's a poem, whether it's like an episode or a theatre show, or even, me being an admin girl at the Blue Room Theatre. Like I've always got this visual of a young Sikh girl who is 12, and I have to imagine her every time I write something because you can get caught up in the hard part of this world and this job is it can feel really challenging, but to remind myself that who is this for? I think audience for everything you do, and I feel like this is applicable to every art form. I think to keep that in mind, like who is this for and why should you even do this? Like why? And I think having that really strong why is the reason why I'm here and why I'm doing what I've done, and I haven't given up. I think that it can be really easy to want to give up. But yeah, it's really cool to know that there's a whole collective, like if you find your people, like no matter where you live, if you find your people and your collaborators and people who have the same values as you, like you can actually make change together. You know, it's not a solo thing. It's not going to happen on your own. So yeah.
That's really cool. And what's your kind of hope for the Perth art scene, both in like the theatre world, you know, music and film world? Because you seem to really champion, like especially coming back from Melbourne and bringing that back here. What do you kind of hope to see for the future of the arts in WA and Perth?
I feel like at the Blue Room, we are in a very interesting situation where I didn't know this. As an audience member, I used to go see shows and I just saw them as a presenting body, a venue, a space that produced shows. But I didn't know that this is actually one of the there's only two other companies in Australia that operate in this way, where we're an artist development organisation, and it's actually about teams coming up with their own ideas, being empowered to tell the stories how they want to tell them, and I and the team has zero creative control. There is zero censorship. And I think what I would really love is the independent theatre scene or independent live performance scene to really make the most of that, because there are so many spaces that censor you and you don't even realise they're censoring you. And I want this space to be the riskiest venue in Australia. I want people to come at me with ideas that are so wild and challenging themselves as artists to really think outside of what they were taught or what they think they should say. I really want to know what they want to say. And in terms of like as a whole, Perth arts community, whether that's film or theatre, we have a lot of division going on right now, and it's really disappointing. But what I hope is that the goal that I have in the org that I'm in right now, and I hope that I can do it beyond as well, is to bring people together. I think that we need something, and I don't know what that something is just yet, but I think we really need to come together more, because we're much more similar than we want. And this division, it's not healthy. It's not healthy for us. And if it's something that is being triggered, I want people to question, why is this thing triggering you? Why is race triggering you right now? Like, I don't want to be afraid. I'm sick of being polite and I'm sick of being afraid, because fear will never get us to the place that we want to be. I think hope and love and compassion and generosity, like I'm excited for those emotions. So, yeah.
That's so beautiful. I was like, that's such a good like soundbite moment. And I'm like, whoa, I feel so inspired now. I'm like, that's so great. But yeah, that's so awesome. Thank you so much for talking with us today. Like, such a lovely energy to bring as well. And I feel like inspired listening to you talk as well.
Oh, thank you.
So that's like all you could hope for. But that's awesome. I want to know more as well. So we'll talk after the recording.
Yes.
That's so cool. But yeah, thank you so much for coming in and talking to us. Our next guest is Callan Durlik, a multi-talented filmmaker hailing from Western Australia, and his latest film, It Only Takes a Night, is currently being released worldwide, so it's very exciting to have you on. How are you today?
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me. I'm great.
Yeah, that's so good. How is the film going? Like, what stage are you at in the release process? I know you mentioned it had been out in the States.
Yeah, so it's done a little cinema run here in Australia, a little cinema run in the States. Then it was acquired by one of the streaming platform stars over there. So they have exclusive rights to it for the next 12 months. And then they've actually bought it for 3 years, but they have 12 months exclusive. And then sort of after that 12 months, they have it. Plus it can go on VOD. And then it's on VOD here in Australia and pretty close to being released in sort of the UK and the rest of Europe as well. So it's sold to most territories around the world. So we're very, very happy with that so far. And people seem to like it, which is always handy. And critics been relatively kind. So that's good.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Yeah. We actually know quite a few people when you guys shot in Perth who were extras in like the scenes. And, like there was like a restaurant scene, I think, and like maybe a club scene or something. And
I still bump into people randomly almost like every week. Like, oh, I was an extra in your movie. I'm like, oh, great, cool. Where are you?
You're like, hey,
there was like hundreds and thousands at the end of it. So yeah, it was great. And yeah, Perth really stepped up for that. And yeah, maybe next film I won't write so many extras into a film, I think.
So like a one room kind of
introspective
collective drama.
Yeah, 3
just
people,
one person.
that's it. Yeah, nothing else.
Yeah, but you shot Perth for London, so it was meant to be set in London. But how did you find that? I mean, did you shoot in London Court? Seems like the obvious location.
It was actually pretty easy. Fremantle was very, very good for London. Then you sort of got your Prince Lane, King Street, places like that. And, once you sort of chuck a few, Grand Lane signs up and a few, subway signs, or not subway signs, but, those signs, the tube up there. And then you sort of intercut that with your London establishers. No one really sort of said anything. There was a couple of people from Perth who were like, oh, I know that place. But we tested it over in the UK, and everyone was like, when did you come here and shoot? We were like, well, we couldn't because it was a pandemic, but thanks for saying that. So, yeah.
That's the best compliment you could get.
Absolutely.
No one even clocked it. That's so good. So was that the main reason behind the decision to shoot in Perth, was not being able to travel, or was it partly as well you just wanted to shoot here and use kind of local resources and local talent? Yeah,
I mean, it was a bit of both. Obviously, the film was always set in London, so I never really wavered from that, never changed that. We did sort of look at shooting it in London for 5 seconds, because then you realise how much extra it's going to cost to go there, and there is something really nice about knowing all the crew, knowing all the extras, knowing all the locations. It really does make it so much easier to make a film when you're comfortable in your surroundings. So we thought about it for a few seconds, but after that it was like, nah, Perth it is, and didn't really look back after we made that decision.
So what was that process like, shooting a feature in Perth where you did have to use so many different locations? I know the Shire of Fremantle is really good with filmmaking. So how was that process? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, Shire of Freo were amazing. City of Perth were amazing. I'd shot a film in Western Australia before called The Naked Wanderer, which I wrote. And that was hectic, because that was, when you talk about location changes, that was like, Bunbury, Perth, Karratha, and 12 different locations in each of those locations kind of thing. So, compared to that, this was an absolute breeze, because, we did have, a nightclub for 2 weeks. We had a restaurant for a week. We had, limited sort of outside stuff. But yeah, I guess, when you're making a feature film, the hardest thing, and it's like the most boring, mundane thing, is parking. And if you can get someone to help you out with your parking, then you're already like home and hosed. So, City of Perth came through with like a parking sponsorship, and same with City of Fremantle. So, yeah, if you're making a film, get your parking sorted first, and then you'll be sweet.
That's actually really good advice.
That's really good advice, because it's all those things you don't think about, and then you're like paying for all the cost, having $27 parking payments.
We had someone got a fine last time we shot in here, and it was a $260 fine.
Get those parking permits, get that sponsored, and you'll be fine.
100%. Oh, the stress of that's got my blood pressure up thinking about it. I'm like, the stress. My goodness.
So if we run it back a bit, can you tell us your journey into filmmaking? How did you get inspired to become a filmmaker in general? Yeah,
sure. I mean, I was always a creative kid. I guess I was the class clown, made people laugh, all that kind of stuff. And I was a big time daydreamer. And my sort of career in the entertainment industry started off in radio. So when I was 17, I moved to Perth and I started working on Nova. And I worked there for about 4 years on air. Then I moved to the UK and did some radio over there in London and Southampton. And it was sort of while I was away that I started to fall out of love with radio, because I really liked being funny, but there's so many constraints on radio. There's sort of 30-second talk breaks or 1-minute talk breaks, and you can only talk about certain things. So that's when I started writing comedy and stand-up comedy. I wouldn't say I'm like an amazing stand-up comic. I'm not a natural sort of get up there and talk and, make fun of people, or they make fun of me and I can give it back. I'm a very good writer though. So if I write something and I memorize it and I learn my lines, I'm a good performer in that sense. So I started writing stand-up while I was over in the UK, and then I moved back to Perth and did a comedy competition called Raw Comedy, which is a 5-minute set. Only people that have really never done comedy before are allowed to do it. And 5 minutes when you first start doesn't sound like much, but when you've got to get up on stage for 5 minutes and make people laugh, it's like the scariest thing ever. But I did that, and I ended up winning Raw Comedy in Perth, and I went to Melbourne, and my 4th gig ever was in front of 2,000 people at Melbourne Town Hall, and was being filmed for ABC.
Oh my gosh.
And I got up and forgot my first line, But then I sort of remembered and I said, I forgot what I was going to say, and everyone laughed, and that was like my first joke. So after that, that's when I sort of started, I got more into stand-up. I started writing more and more. I still, to this day, want my own sketch show because, just creating little sketches and little funny things, I think, to me is the most amount of freedom you can have as a creator and a comic. But until then, I'm sort of still, I started writing scripts and things like that. I wrote a TV show that sort of got to a certain point with ABC, and it came down to them choosing my show or Chris Lilly's show, and of course they chose Chris Lilly's show.
What Chris Lilly show was it?
Would have been one of the earlier ones, like super early ones.
Oh, like when it was back on network TV.
Was it like We Can Be Heroes or something?
Oh, yeah, like one of the very original ones. Yeah.
And then the word I kept hearing when I was pitching TV shows was the slate. Does it fit in with the slate? We've got a slate. Does it fit here? Does it fit there? And I was like, well, fuck you guys. I'm just going to write something that isn't or doesn't need to be on a slate. And that was a film. And that ended up being The Naked Wanderer. So I wrote that. It took me about 18 months to write that and another like 3 years to get it made. And I guess the big linchpin was getting John Cleese attached to that film. God. And once we got him attached, sort of things started snowballing. So
that's the Fawlty
Towers.
Oh my God, that's
Did
mad.
you ask him a million questions about Fawlty Towers? Because I would have.
Absolutely.
Oh my God, that's mad.
And he's the best too, because I always tell this story. So we shot all his stuff in London for The Naked Wanderer, and we had this one shot was him in the back of a limo, and it was Christmas time, and we're sort of like there was me, camera, sound, and him, at the back seat of the limo, and we're all sitting there. And all we had to do was get this one shot. We had to drive down like Oxford Street in the middle of London and get all the like Christmas lights in the background behind the window. Wicked shot, looks amazing in the film, but he nailed it in like 2 seconds. So we were sort of stuck in London on like a Friday night, and we had to drive back to the studio. And our sound guy happened to be French, and the camera guy goes, "Oh, look, just so you know, John, I didn't want to tell you beforehand, but our sound guy's French, just in case you get upset." And he just went off on like all the old Monty Python, like,
That's what
your mother was a hamster, your father smelt of elderberries, like all of that kind of stuff. And, and he just, he told us all these amazing stories. And like, I took so much from him, like no one thought Monty Python was any good to start with. Like no one wanted them to make Life of Brian. The guys that they pitched Fawlty Towers to at the BBC just thought it was boring and were like, you need to get outside of this hotel and do other stuff. And, then it ended up being their biggest show, and they paid him nothing, and he had to sue them, and he, made even more money from it. But yeah, the one thing I get from him, and a lot of people always ask me for advice, and his advice was amazing. It's really no one knows what's good. No one knows what's going to work. No one knows really what they're talking about. In all these like big positions of TV executives and film executives and things like that, what qualifications do they have that it is what people like, that tells you what people like. And on The Naked Wanderer as well, we had one of the producers on The King's Speech, and he said that when they were pitching The King's Speech, which obviously won an Oscar and made $400 million, they said, who wants to watch a movie about us just a stuttering royal? And it's like, everyone.
Yeah, in the end.
One of those people is in this room.
Yeah,
Ian
worked on the
King's Speech. And he even said, who would want to watch this movie?
Yeah. He works on every film, so if you just go through any DVD, he's worked on that film specifically, probably. Yeah, that's so cool. I'm such a Monty Python. I love A Fish Called Wanda. It's one of my favourite movies.
Yeah.
I'm oh my God. Yeah. I want to meet John Cleese now.
Yeah, no, he's very cool, very funny. So,
yeah. All those guys.
Hilarious on set.
Oh, absolutely. And the best thing about him, and I, I've met him and I've met Michael Palin as well. They're very much into just making people laugh and entertaining people, and they don't really care about what camera angle it is, what lighting it is, the makeup, the hair, all that kind of stuff. It's about the performance, the delivery, the script, the line, the moment basically and making someone laugh. So
Yeah, I feel like that's what you really want though from an actor, is like to be so invested in the performance.
100%, yeah. And how many like random movies over time have come out and done so well when people are like, oh, this never had a chance, or it was shot with the tiniest budget.
Yeah,
it's because of the story, it's because of the performance, and really all that other stuff really does have to come secondary.
Definitely. I think that's something that is kind of lost a bit, not always today, but it's kind of more in the indie scene now, like smaller films, is that real focus on, you've got to be focused on technical stuff because you obviously have to do it right. But like that real focus on like what is the heart of it? Are we really thinking about what people are feeling? And that's kind of now in the kind of the age of streaming and like the blockbusters and stuff, it seems like, especially with the big blockbusters, it seems like they're almost so technical that they end up looking bad. I saw Aquaman on TV the other day. I was like, who allowed this? Put Amber Heard in a wig that does not look fake. Like that was insane. Like I was just kind of like, it just looked so, there's just no heart to it. And like with It Only Takes a Night, like there's been a big resurgence, I feel, lately in the rom-com genre since, the last kind of big era we had of it, which was like very iconic. And how did you find that process going through a genre that's a bit of a comedy, like, in a time when, especially with the advent of streaming, it's kind of breaking the formula a little bit, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's just what I like, right? Like, I think when you start to try and make films for other people or for the masses and go, this is what's going to sell really well, and if I put this person, it'll work really well. And it's funny because, someone else said that to me. Like, oh, there's a resurgence of romantic comedies. And I'm like, have they ever gone away? Like, they haven't for me, because I really like them. And, I think The Proposal was on TV again the other night, and I find myself just sitting there and watching it, even though I've watched it 50 times and it's probably on one of the streaming services. I could watch it without ads, but I just sat there and watched it. But I think it does come back to exactly what we were saying just before. It comes back to the heart of the film. I love a good blockbuster as much as the next person, but there's only so many times a superhero can save the world and you go, oh yeah, that was amazing, that's so cool. And, you just know it was all shot on a green screen or, in a volume or something like that. But, nothing beats getting out into the real world and telling a human story. And, I do think there probably has been a resurgence of it because of the pandemic and how sort of split everybody felt. It's just that love, it's that connection. They're the kinds of films I want to make.
For sure, making something that you want to see.
Absolutely.
Which I think is kind of, with COVID, everyone kind of realised, they were like, oh my God, we could get locked down at any time and all the, we're not going to be able to actually work. So might as well try and like get out there and make something that I want to see. That's a very like the Monty Python guys' philosophy as well. They were like, we just want to make something that, and if we're the only ones who laugh at it, cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like we're absolutely fine with that.
And that's it. There's so much negativity, so much hardship in the world. Like, who wants to come home and watch something that's hard to watch and dark? And there's absolutely a place for all that stuff, but I just want to watch stuff that's just going to make me happy, maybe make me cry at the end. That's why Pixar does so well, because they're just human connection stories.
Definitely.
They've got a good one, Elemental, out at the moment.
Yeah, love it.
Beautiful story.
Yeah,
that's so good. Oh, that's awesome. If you had to say a favourite like rom-com, putting me on the spot, of that genre.
No, it's not the spot because I always talk about this. Forgetting Sarah Marshall is probably number one. The Proposal is definitely up there. How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days.
I love that.
Is a cracker. They're probably the top three, I reckon.
100%. I feel like nowadays we need to be like, it's okay if your top four isn't Jean-Luc Godard. Like you can like The Wedding Singer.
Yeah. Or
I
50
love The Wedding
First
Singer.
Dates, those ones.
Something like silly.
Right.
So good.
Yeah.
Quite questionable now when you watch it back.
Yeah, but it's like for the time, I'll just like be transported back to the time I
okay.
initially watched it. Yeah. So obviously you've been directing and writing, and do you have like any? You mentioned you do comedy. Do you have any acting background at all, or?
Yeah, I did. Well, I obviously I can perform and I can do stand-up comedy. So when I wrote The Naked Wanderer and I optioned it with in the contract being that I get to play one of the roles. So held them over the barrel with that one, but I got to play, I guess, the lead role's best mate, and it happened to be John Cleese's nephew in the script as well. But I worked with Angus McLaren on The Naked Wanderer and learnt so much from him. He's like the ultimate professional. Sort of rocked up on the first day of set with him, and he just started talking to me as his character, and I was like, oh, we're doing this. Cool. And we just did it, and it was actually so much fun. yeah, like we spoke all day in our characters. You know, lunchtime, obviously, we would go back to normal that, but sort of on set before action was what our characters would have been doing before that very moment, which was really cool. You know, I sort of just was like, oh, acting is just learning your lines and, you know, rocking up on set and doing a few movements and that's it. But I guess, yeah, getting into the psychology of acting was amazing. And, yeah, he was a great teacher for that.
Do you find now that you understand actors' processes a bit more now that you've been in that role? Because I feel like a lot of people don't really take into consideration that you are putting someone in a moment where they have to emulate an emotion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm so glad that's the way it went in terms of my journey. I wrote and acted first before I directed a feature film because, yeah, acting's hard. Like, it looks really easy. It looks really cool. But, you know, the reason I am writing and directing is because I don't want to act anymore because it sucks. Like, you know, it's hard work. It's long days. You know, you're basically, you know, you're not being told what to do, but, you know, you have your guidelines is the script and the location that you're at. So I just have so much more respect for actors, absolutely. And especially when, you know, In It Only Takes Night, Eliza Taylor, who absolutely smashed it out of the park, she had so many moments where she had to hit, you know, these really big emotional beats. You know, yeah, it's a rom-com and there's lots of comedy in it, but you know, there were moments where, because we had to shoot in a nightclub with 450 extras, she does this really big emotional speech at the end. You know, we had to get her basically to say the start of the speech, skip a bunch because we knew we were going to be cutting in and out of that. Skip a bunch, go to the middle where, again, it was a different emotional level. Skip a bunch, go to the end where it was like full on crying, basically. And she did that all day for 2 days straight, you know, and how exhausting is, like, even just trying to make yourself get into that emotional position for 1 minute is hard enough and exhausting enough. She did it for 2 straight days. And, you know, when you yell cut, she's like happy, smiling and all the rest of it. And you're just like, how the fuck did you just do that? So, yeah, it was amazing.
That's a good thing. It's like going back to our very first episode. We gave Ben Young free promo every episode because we're like, going back to our first episode, but he was talking about, as a director, how he has an acting background. And I feel like directors who understand actors, the difference that it makes is so good, because you would think that's a given, but like having a deeper understanding of how to work with people and to get certain performances out of them, but in a way that's not just like act like this, you know what I mean? Like having that understanding makes such a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it was, I can't remember where I got this from. A mate of mine by the name of Jeffrey Walker, who's directed a bunch of stuff. He's directed all of that, or some of the Clearing show that's on Disney, the new one, The Artful Dodger, that's on Disney. An amazing director. The Portable Door, which is on Stan, he directed. And, you know, every director will give you a percentage on, you know, how important actors are to a film, whether it's 80%, 90%. I think it's like 95%. You know, casting is that important. So yeah, if you can get that cast right, a director's job is really so much easier, or just actually easy in general.
For the future of the WA kind of film scene, both for film, comedy, anything you might be working in, what is your kind of hope for the future? That's really tying back to like the centre of what our podcast is about, is bringing it back to WA and how it's evolving. So what do you hope to see for the future of film here? Yeah,
I mean, I really don't want people to have to leave WA to make it. And I'm all for making West Australian stories or Australian stories and things like that. But I think what's more important is making stuff, anything here, basically, and having a real industry, and having continuous work for people. You know, selfishly, I want continuous projects of my own to just go and go and go. But what that means in turn is, you know, a slate of projects basically being made in Western Australia. And yeah, again, I don't think it really matters what we do. And I also don't think 100% like great that studios are being built and things like that. But if you look at examples like what Peter Jackson did with Lord of the Rings in New Zealand, there was absolutely nothing in that country. He had no business making those movies. And, you know, they absolutely cleaned up. They're my 3 favourite movies of all time. So, I think we really need to back ourselves and back West Australians in showing that we can actually do anything. And it shouldn't be about like, we've only got, a certain level of cast and crew here, so we can only do this, or we can only do budget levels up to 20 million or things like that. It's like, no, we can actually do anything. There's so much space here. There's so many cool locations. There's so many warehouses. There's guys in Perth that did all the VFX for the new Elvis film, and were part of that Oscar-winning team. And so, like, why can't we just make anything here in WA? So, that's my whole thing is, we really need to sell ourselves to the world a lot better in what we're doing, because we're 100% capable of making anything here in WA.
For sure. And then my other question was, what do you have coming up? Obviously, you're in kind of like post phase. Photo Only Takes a Night. But what are you working on? What have you got coming up?
Yeah, so I've just optioned a new film to a producer on the East Coast, but we're going to try and make that in WA. But again, these are international films, so they're not necessarily a West Australian story or anything like that. Very universal, universal connection, that kind of stuff. And then working on an animated TV show as well.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
That'll be cool. We can talk more about that after. Yeah. You don't want to reveal too much about it, like, legally on the show. So.
Thank you so much, Callan, for coming in.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
No worries.
Awesome. We look forward to seeing what you're doing next.
Cool.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for tuning in. We want to say a big thank you to Limitless Studios and The Backlot, who sponsored this show. Without them, we wouldn't be able to do it. And all of our supporters will also be in the slides at the end. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.